I still remember the exact way Kathy said it. She didn't yell, she didn't cry at first. She just stood there in the kitchen with her arms folded, looking at me like I was someone she used to know. And then she said, "You're not the same person I fell in love with anymore." Man, that sentence hit me harder than I think she even realized. Because the crazy part is, she was right. I'm not the same guy. But what she never stopped to ask was why. She said it like I just drifted into becoming someone else, like I woke up one day and decided to be colder, quieter, less fun, less spontaneous, less me. But that's not what happened. What happened is, little by little, over time, I changed, trying to become the man she kept telling me she needed. And somewhere in the middle of doing that, I lost myself. My name's Craig. I'm 32, and Kathy's 32 too. We've been together long enough for me to remember the early version of us real clearly. Back then, things felt easy. I was playful, sarcastic, relaxed. I'd tease her, make stupid jokes, stay up late talking with her, plan random things on a whim. I wasn't perfect, but I was present. I was comfortable in my own skin. And that version of me? That's supposedly the guy she fell in love with. At least, that's what she says now. But back then, even in those early days, there were always little comments, little preferences, little helpful suggestions. Nothing huge at first. She'd say things like, "I just wish you were a little more serious sometimes," or "I need a man who makes me feel secure," or "I don't want to have to explain every little thing. I want you to just step up." Now look, none of that sounds unreasonable on its own. Honestly, if you love someone, hearing stuff like that makes you think, okay, I can do that. I can be better. I can show up harder. So that's what I did. I started adjusting. When she said I joked too much during serious moments, I toned that down. When she said I needed more structure, I became more structured. When she said I wanted to feel like I had a plan, I became the guy with a plan. When she said I seemed too laid back about life, I started carrying everything more seriously. I thought I was growing. I thought that was love. I thought being a good boyfriend meant paying attention to what your partner needs and trying your best to meet them there. And to be clear, I still believe effort matters. But there's a difference between growing with somebody and slowly editing yourself down into whatever version makes them most comfortable. And that's what I didn't realize I was doing. It wasn't just the big things either. It was the daily stuff. Kathy liked when I dressed a certain way, so I changed how I dressed. She thought some of my friends were immature, so I stopped seeing them as much. She didn't like how much time I spent on certain hobbies because she felt they were a waste of energy, so I cut back on those too. She wanted better communication, so I started monitoring every word that came out of my mouth. Do you know how exhausting it is to constantly filter yourself in a relationship? To stop and think before every joke, to measure every reaction, to second-guess whether your natural response is going to be interpreted as insensitive, immature, careless, or not emotionally intelligent enough. After a while, I started feeling like I wasn't being loved for who I was being rewarded for how well I adapted. And the saddest part? I didn't even resent her at first. I blamed myself. I thought, maybe this is just what adulthood is. Maybe becoming a better man means becoming less of the version of yourself that feels light. Maybe responsibility is supposed to feel this heavy. Maybe love is supposed to feel like constant self-correction. So I kept going. I became more dependable, more thoughtful, more careful, more restrained. I planned more dates. I anticipated more needs. I spoke softer during arguments. I apologized faster. I pushed my own frustrations aside because I thought, she just needs reassurance right now. This isn't about me. And again, none of those things are bad in isolation. That's the part that makes this so tricky. From the outside, I looked like a better boyfriend. But internally, I was disappearing. I laughed less. I talked less. I stopped bringing up certain opinions because it felt easier to just avoid the tension. I stopped doing certain things that made me feel like myself because they always somehow turned into a conversation about priorities, maturity, or effort. And then one day, Kathy started asking me what was wrong all the time. You ever notice how strange that is? Someone can spend months, maybe years, pushing you to become more polished, more controlled, more acceptable to them. And then when you finally stop sounding like yourself, they miss the version of you they helped sand down. That was us. She'd say, "You seem distant lately," or "You don't laugh like you used to," or "Why do I feel like you're always holding something back?" And I wanted to say, because every time I was fully myself, there was some subtle message that I needed to improve it. But I didn't say that, not then. I just said I was tired, or stressed, or had a lot on my mind, because honestly, I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was blaming her for everything. And I wasn't trying to do that. I know relationships require compromise. I know we all influence each other. I know nobody stays exactly the same forever. But there's a line. There's a line between healthy compromise and self-erasure, and I crossed it trying to make her happy. The moment that really woke me up happened during an argument we had a few weeks ago. It started over something small. Always does, right? We were supposed to go out with some friends, and I said I wasn't really in the mood. I'd had a long week. I was drained. I wanted a quiet night. Kathy got irritated and said I'd been off for a while. Then she hit me with it. She said, "You're not the same person I fell in love with anymore." And I just stood there looking at her. Because in that moment, I swear everything became crystal clear. I thought about the guy I was when we met. The guy who laughed louder, who felt free, who didn't overanalyze every sentence, who still made time for his friends without guilt, who still had hobbies, energy, spontaneity, and confidence. And I thought about the version of me standing there now, careful, tired, guarded, always trying to get it right. Then I asked her something I probably should have asked a long time ago. I said, "Do you know why I'm not that guy anymore?" And she looked at me like she didn't expect me to have an answer. I told her, "Because I spent the last few years trying to be the man you kept telling me she needed." That shut the whole room down. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me. So I kept going. I said, "Every time you told me I needed to be more serious, I adjusted. Every time you told me I needed to communicate differently, I adjusted. Every time you hinted that something natural about me wasn't enough, I adjusted. I thought I was loving you well. I thought I was growing. But somewhere in all that, I stopped feeling like myself." And once I started, I couldn't stop. I told her I wasn't saying she forced me. She didn't put a gun to my head. These were still my choices. But love has a way of making you volunteer pieces of yourself without realizing how much you're giving up, especially when you care deeply, especially when you want it to work, especially when you think being chosen depends on becoming more acceptable. I told her, "You say you miss the man you fell in love with, but that man kept getting feedback that he needed to change." That's the thing nobody talks about enough. People say they want honesty, authenticity, vulnerability, playfulness, emotional openness. But sometimes what they actually want is a version of you that feels good to them at all times. And those are not the same thing. The real you is going to be inconvenient sometimes. The real you is going to have edges. The real you is going to do things differently than they would. The real you might not fit perfectly into the picture they have in their head of what a partner should be. That doesn't mean you're wrong, it means you're real. Kathy started crying after I said all that. And I'll be honest, seeing her cry didn't make me feel victorious, it made me sad. Because I do love her. I don't think she was some evil mastermind trying to turn me into a robot. I think she had expectations, some spoken, some unspoken, and I loved her enough that I kept trying to rise to meet them. The problem is, I never stopped to ask whether those expectations left room for me to still be me. And she never stopped to ask whether the man she was asking for was slowly replacing the man she claimed to love. That conversation was probably the most honest one we've ever had. She told me she never meant for me to feel like I had to become someone else. I believe her, but intent doesn't erase impact. A lot of people don't mean to do damage. They just keep asking for little changes, until one day they're standing across from a person who feels emotionally flattened